Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the US presidential election show. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all back. It's also a great pleasure to welcome back to the show the in-house politics expert at LP Brussels, Ryan Hunter. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, 2 or so weeks to go now. It's getting extraordinarily close to the final laps, but there's been a hell of a lot going on in the States, of course, in the last week. First of all, of course, those rival town hall shows. Do you want to quickly analyze those for us? Was there a clear winner? Did Trump regain a bit of momentum?
Great question. Well, first of all, both candidates had their own town halls at the exact same time. This was replacing what would have been the second debate between the two candidates. One was on ABC, one on NBC. And I think there was quite a contrast, quite a stark contrast between the two. I'll start with Joe Biden's one, where the biggest accusation would have been that he got into some very long-winded answers on policy questions, really into the weeds. The best word you might describe that town hall as is boring, which some people might like. It's a return to the normalcy on the U.S. politics scene. And I think his purpose at the town hall was to get his policies across and his message across. And I think the message he got across was that he's going to restore some normalcy, and here's a guy who has a lot of policies to address some of the key issues. Now on the Trump side, there's almost like a town hall of two halves. The first half he spent most of the time arguing with the moderator, who really took the beginning of the town hall as an almost interview. Trying to get Trump to disavow QAnon, trying to get him to disavow some of the conspiracy theories that they've been putting out there. And that led to a lot of back and forth between Trump and the moderator, which was not too dissimilar to what we saw Trump do with the moderator in the first debate. And then the second half, he was a lot calmer when he was speaking just to the voters. So like in debates, most people would have watched the first part of the town halls. They're at the same time, so you have to choose. But after they passed, you could have seen a comparison done side by side in all the news outlets, and I think the contrast was not too flattering for the president.
Okay, any clear winner though, Ryan?
It's tough to say, as they were not really debating each other. I think Trump's inability to disavow some of the QAnon conspiracies and to answer questions about his COVID testing made him seem not too transparent at times, whereas Joe Biden was purely talking about policy issues. So I think if the outcome was to get your message across and your ideas across, Joe Biden would have been the clear winner.
Okay, well, the other big development in the past week was, of course, the Senate hearings for the nomination for the Supreme Court by the President, Amy Coney Barrett. Any clues there as to how that may impact on the election, Ryan? To me, she came over with a lot of credibility, professionalism, confidence, and indeed seemed to rally the Republican side. Isn't there a hint there, perhaps, that she's actually done Trump a lot of favors in terms of her positioning during those hearings?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. It's the hearing. If you were to compare it to the Brett Kavanaugh hearing prior to this one, it was very uneventful compared to that. And Amy Coney Barrett is a highly qualified judge. And a lot of the issues that the Democrats were raising were not necessarily with her so much as how the Republican Party was pushing her nomination. So the debate never really centered on her beliefs. However, Democrats still tried to ask her questions, and she avoided being drawn on some of the more sensitive issues, which allowed her to escape any sort of controversy. Now, voters who were looking to gain some sort of information on how she might rule on some really important cases that the Supreme Court may hear soon, will come away disappointed in her refusal to be drawn on those. And I think the Republicans would be happy with how calm it was. But in terms of mobilizing voters, it wasn't really the back and forth fight that we saw during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings.
Okay, I saw one commentator actually say how different the election would be if Amy Coney Barrett was the Republican candidate for the presidency. What's your thought about that?
Absolutely.
Brian?
I mean, I think there was a particular exchange with Senator Booker from New Jersey, a Democrat, where he and she had some really interesting back and forth discussions on judicial issues. Bearing in mind this is the Judiciary Committee that's hearing her before then voting this week, and then the full Senate next week. So there were some good judicial questions, and you can see why a lot of the conservative base of the party would be quite pleased with her performance and her beliefs and how she handled some potentially tough questions.
Indeed, and of course the hearing, I believe, continues this week, Ryan, with a provisional vote, I think, also scheduled for the coming week.
Yeah, this week. Yes, this week the Judiciary Committee will vote on her before the full Senate confirmation vote happens next week.
Okay, well, we're now going to do a deep dive. As you know, on this show, we pride ourselves in looking at the headlines, analyzing what's really going on, but also taking a deep dive into some of the issues that are really shaping and influencing the campaign and ultimately the result. And one of them is the use of emotion in the campaign. And remember, I think very early on in this series, Ryan, you highlighted how it wasn't just the Republicans and Trump this time that were leveraging emotion to advance their cause, but the Democrats were getting pretty good at it as well. And I think you picked an example from the Lincoln Project. Do you want to maybe explain what the Lincoln Project is first? And I think you're then going to show us one of their latest attack ads.
Yes, absolutely. And the Lincoln Project was founded by some former Republican operatives who have essentially decided that enough was enough, and must be a year ago now when they founded the Lincoln Project, and they've essentially been trying to directly target Republican voters. Trying to convince them to vote for Joe Biden. They've endorsed Joe Biden officially. Some of their ads have been attack ads against President Trump himself, and their message is essentially trying to get the president off message, force him to address the Lincoln Project ads, and that every day he's off message, he's unable to put his own message across. Now, the ad that we'll be showing, the ad that I've picked, was from last week, and personally, I think it's their best ad to date. I think it's targeting your suburban women voters, particularly parents, and I think it's going to have quite an emotional impact for an ad.
Okay. Well, Ryan, let's take a look. It's called Girl in the Mirror. Let's have a look at the ad.
Imagine a young girl looking in the mirror, searching for role models in the world to give her hope that one day she too can make a difference. Now imagine how she feels when she watches women being verbally attacked.
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Maligned.
And this monster that was on stage with Mike Pence, who destroyed her last night, by the way.
Belittled.
I'm not thinking, Mr.
That's
President.
okay. I know you're not thinking. You never do.
I'm sorry?
Harassed.
Blood coming out of her, wherever.
Insulted.
And I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say,
Your daughters are listening and absorbing that message right in front of your eyes. Now imagine a different future for her. A future with a president who doesn't just value a female voice, but chooses one to be his right-hand woman. A strong woman. A woman with compassion. A woman unafraid to take on a bully.
And I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
A woman who not only believes in the American dream, she embodies it. Imagine that little girl in the mirror, because that little girl is yours. And your actions on November 3rd will define who she sees. Vote for change. Vote for her. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well, yep, very emotional, very, very effective, and obviously highlighting Trump's attitude, behavior, and disrespect towards women. Do you think it will have an effect? Certainly the polls seem to be suggesting the Democrats are making inroads on that suburban female vote. But do ads like this really make a difference at this stage of the campaign?
Absolutely. I mean, as people are voting right now, voters will be some vulnerable, especially those who are not quite sure which way they'll be voting, or maybe vulnerable to having their mind changed. And I know that Donald Trump has been recently trying to reclaim the suburban women vote that seems to have abandoned him in the polls. So this is a direct counter to the Trump campaign's attempt to reclaim that demographic.
And do you think there are lessons maybe for centre-left parties in Europe who found it difficult to leverage emotion as a campaign vehicle? Perhaps they have a lot to learn from the approach adopted by the Democrats, and in particular the Lincoln Project.
Absolutely. I think people have often shied away from the use of emotion as it's been tied to the more populist campaigns. But I think nowadays people expect some sort of emotion in a campaign just to show that you understand the issues of the day, and you're not some elitist party that has forgotten about the regular people.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Just to remind everyone, that was a video ad from the Lincoln Project. We're now going to move on to the early signs of perhaps the result. Ryan, the voting's been going for some time now. I know you've been looking at the early voting that's been occurring in many states. Any indications at all, Ryan, as to who's ahead in the early voting?
Well, I think it's no surprise that there's been have been more Democrats putting their early votes in. So far, as a total number, there have been 28 million ballots that have been cast. Now that's a big number, and that totally eclipses the early voting numbers that we saw in 2016. Now it's tough to compare because it's a whole different context, of course. But to understand how big of a number that really is, early voting hasn't been open that long in most states. But what we've seen so far in early voting is that 20% of the total number of votes cast in 2016, that same number have already been cast now in early voting. So that's a big group of voters that have already voted. And there are two counties in Texas that I want to point out: Harris County, that includes Houston, and Denton County, which is a much more rural county in Texas. Both of these counties have had early voting open for 4 days. One's a Democratic stronghold, one you would assume would be a Republican one, and both have already eclipsed their total 2016 early voting numbers in 4 days. So that points to mobilization on both sides. And in a state that may very well be a battleground state for the election in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. And wouldn't Trump maybe draw some comfort from that, though, that he seems to be mobilizing his base too in the counties where his vote is strong?
It's tough to point to that because most states don't have people affiliated to a party in their registration. So it's tough to say in some places how many Democrats have voted over Republicans. So Texas is one of those where you cannot make that conclusion. What you can say is that mobilization in counties that are historically voting one way or the other do point to a certain trend, and that trend is very positive for Democrats. And I refer to Denton County to say, hold on a minute, it may not be so negative for the Republicans just yet.
Okay, well, that sounds fascinating. And again, I'm sure we'll return to the early voting analysis in the coming week. A lot going on in the coming week. We're going to try and show a Republican attack ad next week, Ryan, to have a look at that. The hearing will continue. But of course, what is the latest on the debate? I think we all assume there's a debate going to take place on Thursday. Mm-hmm. Is that going to take place, Ryan? Is it going to be an in-person debate, or will it be a virtual debate like the town halls last week? What is the situation with the debate? And indeed, is this the last one? Because I know the Trump camp have been pushing for an extra debate just ahead of the poll.
Absolutely. Well, all signs show the debate will go ahead. in person. The moderator, well, the commission on the debates has already released the 6 topics. So we're going to be talking about fighting COVID, American families, race in America, national security, leadership, and climate change as the 6 topics. Many will find this unfortunate, but the format hasn't changed. There hasn't been any announcement of new rules from the first debate, despite a big push for that. So many will expect an equally boisterous debate as the first one. But the debate is taking place in Tennessee this Thursday, and all signs point to it going ahead and it being the final debate.
Yeah, and presumably one of the last chances either side has of influencing the outcome. It's one of the last final milestones on the journey to election day. I know you'll be joining the show after the debate with the Honourable Michael Meehan, so I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and you'll be staying up all night, Ryan, as you always do for us, to report back on the debate.
The night shift.
Indeed. We are grateful to you for that, as you know. Well, final question really is your prediction. I know, again, you've been looking at your battleground states, and we're going to put them up again, just to remind everyone of the 5 states in particular that you think are crucial for Biden if he's going to win this campaign. But there's a few other states I know you've also started to include because of Biden's lead nationally, essentially. So do you want to take us through what the latest polling is? Yeah. And then, as always, Ryan, tell us what your prediction is.
Well, the latest polling nationally looks excellent for Joe Biden. His lead seems to still be somehow increasing ever so slowly. So I thought, looking at our 5 states that we've chosen as battleground states, there's been an interesting phenomenon in recent months that sort of runs contrary to the popular perception. And I'll really focus on Arizona, Florida, and Pennsylvania, those 3 in particular. And what those 3 share is that voters can register with a party before voting. So we get an idea of how many people have registered as Democrats, as Republicans, or as independents. And since March, Florida and North Carolina have seen a substantially more Republicans registering than Democrats. And since June, more than double the number of Republicans have registered in Pennsylvania than Democrats. So, and the only state that you would call a battleground where that trend is not being seen is Arizona, which also allows voters to register with a party affiliation. Now, what does that say? That doesn't say anything that you can draw conclusions from, because younger voters don't tend to affiliate to a party in their registration. But it does perhaps dampen the mood, however slightly, that we've been talking for months about how a higher turnout may certainly help the Democrats, but we haven't necessarily covered how a high turnout may also be equally seen on the Republican side. And I think these registration numbers point to some mobilization on the Republican side. Now, whether they will vote for Trump or not, that's a big question. But certainly, we should not assume that the high number of registration and turnout will automatically fall towards Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And I haven't forgotten my prediction. My prediction remains unchanged this week. And I think looking at some of the early voting numbers and looking at the high turnout in places where Democrats need to turn people out, I think that the case for Joe Biden is growing stronger. And do you have any doubts at all in that very confident and clear prediction? Always doubts. If 2016 taught us anything, is one must always doubt their own prediction, because I believe over the weekend it was 4 years to the day where the New York Times had given Hillary Clinton a 91% chance of winning the election. So if that taught us anything, is that polls can never really be trusted because they're always going to miss something. And 2 is that one should always have a bit of a reflection on their own prediction just to make sure they haven't missed anything as well. Well, thank you for that, Ryan, and that health warning too. And I'm sure we'll be absolutely fascinated to hear what you think of the debate in the coming week, and obviously other developments as well, I'm sure. In the meantime, thanks to our ever loyal viewers for tuning in once again.
tune in next week, of course. But in the meantime, don't forget to like the show, share the show, comment and tell us what you think, and put some questions to Ryan and also for Michael Meehan for the next show. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, don't forget to subscribe and to ring that all-important bell to our viewers at home. Take care and see you next week. Goodbye.